There are 7 places in the world, and each of them claims that I was born there. Some call me Homer, others say there never was a Homer at all. No one truly knows who I was, and no one can say for certain where I was born. Perhaps I was only a name. Perhaps I was simply the voice of many wandering storytellers. Perhaps Homer was never one man, but a memory carried from one generation to the next. But there is something more important than knowing who I really was. Because what truly survives through time is not the storyteller, but the story. Nearly 3,000 years have passed. The wars are long over, the heroes are gone, and the ancient cities have become ruins. And yet, a story about the sea, about war, about gods, and about one man's journey home is still alive today. That story is the Odyssey. I am Homer, or at least, that is what the world has always called me. 2,800 years ago, on the shores of the Aegean Sea, when night fell, people would gather around the fire and wait quietly for a bard to pluck his lyre and sing of heroes, gods, and the sea. There were no books then, no films, no internet. Stories survived only by passing from voice to voice, generation after generation. Tonight, let me borrow that ancient voice once more and tell this story to you again. If you are driving, please keep your eyes on the road ahead. If you are already lying down, let your breathing slow. If you are busy, let this story keep you company for a quiet while. But before we begin, think of a place. Not the most beautiful place in the world, but the place you'd most want to return to when you are exhausted, wounded, or lost. That place is called home. Now, if someone told you that giving up going home would bring you wealth, power, even eternal life, what would you choose? 3,000 years ago, someone truly faced that choice. He refused immortality. He refused ease. He refused everything the gods offered him. Again and again he sailed into storms. Again and again he brushed past death. Not for glory, not to conquer the world. He simply wanted to go home. His name was Odysseus, and this is his story. Welcome to the Odyssey. That year, Troy burned. Everyone thought the war was over. No one knew that an even longer journey home was just beginning. (1184 BC), the eastern shore of the Aegean, the city of Troy is burning. This city had withstood the Greek coalition for a full 10 years. 10 years of siege, 10 years of dying, 10 years of the agony of being away from home. Achilles, the mightiest of the Greeks, was dead. Hector, Troy's bravest prince, was dead. Countless men had died in a war sparked by one woman's elopement with one man. But Troy's walls had never been breached, not until one man devised that plan. A wooden horse. A massive wooden horse with 30 Greek soldiers hidden in its belly. The Trojans hauled it into the city as a trophy, and that night the soldiers climbed out of its belly and threw open the gates. The man who devised this plan was named Odysseus. He wasn't the tallest, he wasn't the most handsome, he wasn't the fastest with a sword, but he was the cleverest, clever enough to accomplish with wood and lies what strength and courage never could. The night Troy burned, Odysseus stood by the sea, looking at his 12 ships. He was thinking of only one thing: home, Ithaca, Penelope, his wife, Telemachus, his son, an infant when he left, who should be able to walk by now. No, wait, 10 years. His son must be 10 years old now. Odysseus took a deep breath and turned to board his ship. But fate never follows a man's plans. In the chaos of Troy's fall, some Greek soldiers made a mistake that enraged the gods. They looted and killed inside Athena's temple, leaving an unforgivable sacrilege on her altar. Athena, goddess of wisdom, the Greeks' longtime protector, was furious. She went to her uncle, Poseidon, god of the sea. "Teach them a lesson," she said. The moment the Greek fleet set sail from the shores of Troy, the storm came. Troy, an shadow art, not an ordinary storm. It was the wrath of the gods made into waves, higher than city walls, tossing ships around like leaves. Countless heroes who had not died on the battlefield of Troy sank instead into the sea on their way home. Odysseus's 12 ships survived, miraculously, but he did not yet know that the real trial had only just begun. The wind blew the fleet toward the coast of Thrace. There stood a city called Ismarus, home to the Sicontes, allies of Troy. The sensible choice was to sail past it, but the soldiers had been adrift too long, exhausted, thirsty, their blood still burning with the violence accumulated from war. They attacked the city. Odysseus told them to get back on the ships, quickly, while they still could. No one listened. They lit fires on the beach and drank in celebration, drunk on victory, forgetting the danger. That night, Siconte reinforcements arrived. In the morning light, Odysseus counted the empty spaces on the ships. 72 men, gone. Did he say anything? No. He raised his head, looked at the soldiers who remained, and gave the order to sail. This was the first heavy lesson of the voyage. The greatest danger after a victory is not the enemy, but one's own pride. The next stop was an island with no name. Its people were called the Lotus Eaters. They ate a particular flower whose juice let a person forget all pain and all longing too. Odysseus sent 3 men ashore to scout. Those 3 men ate the lotus and sat on the sand with hollow, contented smiles on their faces. They did not want to come back. They had forgotten Ithaca. They had forgotten the people waiting for them. They had forgotten who they were. Odysseus dragged them back to the ship himself. They wept like children, crying for that sweet forgetting. He tied them below deck and gave the order to leave. You might think this cruel, but consider this. If there were something that could make you never long for anything again, never feel pain again, never yearn again, would you want it? Odysseus's answer was no, because longing too is proof that you are alive. A turning point of fate. What happened next was the most crucial turning point of the whole story. An island of cliffs, smoke rising from a mountaintop. Odysseus took 12 soldiers ashore. They found an enormous cave filled with cheese, hung rows of lamb, and great jars of goat's milk stored in the corners. "Let's take it and go," the soldiers said. "Wait," said Odysseus. "Let's wait for the cave's owner to return. Perhaps he will welcome us kindly, give us gifts, and show us the way." This was one of the gravest mistakes of his entire journey. Night fell. The ground began to shake. The owner of the cave had returned. His name was Polyphemus, the Cyclops, son of Poseidon. He was as tall as a small mountain, with a single eye in the center of his forehead, and a voice like boulders rolling down a canyon. He drove his flock into the cave and casually picked up a massive boulder to seal the entrance, a stone that 20 oxen could not have moved. Then he lit a fire and saw Odysseus and his 12 soldiers. His gaze was sharp and cold as a hawk's. "Who are you? Where do you come from?" Odysseus stepped forward, kept his composure, and said, "We are Greeks, just returned from the battlefield of Troy. In the name of Zeus, we ask for your hospitality and shelter." The giant laughed. That laugh made the cave's stone walls tremble. The Cyclops answered to know Zeus. He said, "We are mightier than the gods. My father is Poseidon." Then, before anyone could react, he snatched up 2 soldiers as easily as a man might snatch up 2 chickens, and smashed them against the ground and ate them, as if it were an ordinary dinner. Then he lay down and fell asleep, snoring like thunder. The Cyclops, a turning point of fate. Inside the cave, the 10 surviving soldiers lay in the darkness through the giant's snoring, wide-eyed, not daring to move. Odysseus gripped his sword and walked toward the giant. One stroke could pierce that cursed eye, but he stopped. He glanced at the boulder sealing the cave's entrance. Even if they killed the giant, that stone couldn't be moved by 10 men. They would be trapped in the cave, starving slowly to death, or discovered by the giant's kin. He put the sword away, sat down, and began to think. The true weapon was never the sword, it was the mind. The next day, the giant ate 2 more men, then drove his flock out to graze, sealing the cave entrance behind him with the boulder. Inside, Odysseus found a huge olive wood club, sharpened one end, and hid it in a pile of dung. That night, when Polyphemus returned, he ate 2 more men. Odysseus stepped forward, holding a bowl of strong wine he had carried with him, and said with a smile, "Great giant, have a bowl of wine to help your meal go down." The giant took a sip, and his eyes lit up. He had never tasted anything like it. He drained the bowl and held out his hand for more. Odysseus poured him another bowl and another. The giant, flushed and in high spirits, asked, "What is your name? I will give you a gift." Odysseus answered without hesitation, "My name is Nobody. Nobody is my name." Polyphemus laughed and said, "Then my gift to you is that I will eat you last." Then he collapsed, dead drunk. Odysseus took the sharpened club from the dung pile and put it in the fire, heating it until it glowed, until it was nearly ablaze. "Now," he said. He and his remaining men used all their strength to drive the burning club into Polyphemus's single eye. The scream that followed shattered the night. The other Cyclopes on the nearby mountains woke and ran to the cave, calling out, "Polyphemus, what's wrong? Who is hurting you?" "Pachiten." The other giants fell silent for a moment, then dispersed. If nobody was hurting him, he must be sick or having a nightmare. Nothing to do with them. A brilliant lie. The next morning, the blinded giant pushed the boulder aside to let his flock out, kneeling at the entrance, hands spread, feeling for anyone who tried to escape. Odysseus hid his remaining 6 soldiers under the bellies of the sheep, telling them to grip the wool tightly and crawl out with the flock. He himself hid beneath the largest, strongest ram. Polyphemus ran a hand along the back of every sheep, but it never occurred to him that a man might be hiding underneath. When the great ram reached the entrance, it paused. The giant stroked its back, his voice unusually gentle. "My favorite old friend, why are you walking so slowly today? Is it because you know your master is suffering? If only you could speak and tell me where that nobody is hiding." The ram said nothing. It walked slowly out of the cave, toward the sea, toward the waiting ship. They ran to the ship, herded the sheep aboard too, quickly cast off, and rowed out to sea. When they had rowed a safe distance, Odysseus stood at the bow. He should have stayed silent. He should have left it at that, but he didn't. He turned back toward the shore and shouted, "Hey, Cyclops, you ate my men because you thought you'd never be punished. But the one who blinded you today was me, Odysseus, king of Ithaca, son of Laertes." The soldiers desperately pulled at him, tried to hold him down, begged him to be quiet, but it was too late. Polyphemus staggered to the shore, tore a boulder from the mountaintop, and hurled it toward the sound of the voice. The stone landed just in front of the bow. The wave it raised pushed the ship back toward shore. The other giants fell silent for a moment, then dispersed. If nobody was hurting him, he must be sick, or having a nightmare, nothing to do with them. They rowed with all their strength and barely escaped again. Then the Cyclops knelt on the beach and cried out to the sky, "Father, Poseidon, if I am truly your son, let Odysseus never reach home. Or if he is fated to return, let him return last of all, alone, on a stranger's ship, to a home full of tragedy." The waves fell silent for a moment. Then, somewhere in the vast depths, something seemed to hear that prayer. From that moment on, the entire sea became Odysseus's enemy. The wind god Aeolus gave Odysseus a bag containing all the unfavorable winds. For 9 days and 9 nights they sailed with a fair wind, and Ithaca was already faintly visible on the horizon. Then Odysseus fell asleep. The soldiers opened the bag. Every wind sealed inside burst out at once and blew them straight back to where they started. Odysseus woke and looked at that empty stretch of sea and said nothing at all. He did not cry, did not rage, did not blame anyone. He simply picked up an oar and went on. Later, they reached the island of Aiae. At the center of its forest stood a palace, smoke rising from its chimney. Odysseus split his men into 2 groups and sent one ahead to scout. That group found the palace. Before its doors stood lions and wolves, but they were as gentle as cats, wagging their tails, watching the soldiers with an odd, almost human sorrow in their eyes. From within the palace came a woman singing. She stepped outside, beautiful, graceful, her voice as soft as a flowing stream. She invited everyone in and gave them food and wine. Everyone accepted the invitation. Only one man stood at the palace door and did not go in. Something felt wrong to him. There was something speaking in the eyes of those lions and wolves. When his companions finished their cups, the woman raised a wand and touched them lightly, and they all turned into pigs. That woman was named Circe, a witch. Odysseus went into the palace alone, sword in hand. On the way, a young man stopped him and handed him an herb, white root, black flower. "Put this in your wine, and her magic will fail," the young man said, and then his form changed into the face of a god Odysseus recognized. It was Hermes, messenger of the gods. Odysseus hid the herb in his pouch and walked into Circe's palace. He took the cup she offered and drank it. Circe waited for the transformation, waited for the outcome she knew so well. Nothing happened. For the first time, true astonishment crossed her face. Odysseus drew his sword and held it to her throat. She smiled, not a fearful smile, a smile of genuine admiration. "You are that Odysseus," she said. "Hermes told me that one day a man named Odysseus would come, the one man my magic could not conquer." She turned his companions back into men. Then she became his ally, even his guide. Odysseus stayed on her island for a year. After a year, he told her he had to go home. Circe nodded and then told him, "On your way home, you must go to one place first, the land of the dead. You must find the spirit of the prophet Tiresias and ask him about your journey home." At the edge of the world lies a place of eternal darkness, the realm where the dead reside. Following Circe's instructions, Odysseus performed a particular ritual in a particular place to summon the spirits of the dead. He dug a pit and poured in honey, milk, and lamb's blood, then drew his sword and stood guard by the pit, waiting for the spirit he needed to see. But before Tiresias arrived, others came first. The first to arrive was Elpenor. He was Odysseus's youngest soldier who, before they left Circe's island, had gotten drunk, fallen from a rooftop, and died. They had left in such a hurry that they hadn't even had time to bury him. His spirit had no tears, only a plea. "Please go back, burn my body, and give me a grave, so I may rest among the dead." Odysseus agreed. Then another spirit came. Odysseus's hands began to tremble. It was his mother. When he left Ithaca for the war, she had still been alive. When had she died? Why had she died? He wanted to rush forward and embrace her, but a spirit cannot be touched. Each time he reached out, she dispersed like smoke between his fingers. Her voice was as faint as wind. "My child, your wife weeps for you every day, waits for you every day. Your father has grown old, weeping in the fields. Your son manages your estate, waiting for you to return. And you?" Odysseus asked. "Why did you die?" "It was longing," she said. "It was longing for you that broke my heart." Odysseus simply stood there, watching his mother's spirit slowly fade, vanishing into the darkness. He did not cry, not because he wasn't grieving, but because he knew that if he cried, he might never be able to move again. Then Tiresias came, the blind prophet, and told him everything that awaited him on his journey home. The cattle of the sun god, never to be touched. The suitors waiting for him in Ithaca, who must be dealt with. Poseidon's wrath, which could only be calmed by a particular ritual. Odysseus committed every word to memory, turned, and left the land of the dead, toward the light, toward life. You may have heard the name. They were half-human, half-bird creatures who lived on a reef, luring passing sailors with their song. That song contained whatever each listener longed for most. For a homesick man, they sang of home. For a man hungry for knowledge, they sang of every truth. For a lonely man, they sang of being loved. No one could resist that song. Every ship that came near was wrecked on the rocks, and the reef around it was strewn with bones. Circe had told Odysseus how to pass safely. He ordered every soldier to plug their ears with beeswax. Then he had himself bound to the mast, his own ears left unplugged. He wanted to hear it. He wanted to hear that legendary song with his own ears. But he told his men, "No matter what I say, no matter how I struggle, do not untie me." When the reef appeared on the horizon, the song began. I cannot describe what that song sounded like, because that song was different for every person. For Odysseus, what was in that song? Perhaps Penelope's voice, perhaps the scent of Ithaca, perhaps the laughter of the sun he had never seen. He struggled, he wept. He ordered his men to untie him, using Greek, using tears, using commands, using every means he had. The ship sailed on. The soldiers could not hear his voice. They simply rowed, oars in, oars out, a steady rhythm that never paused. Not until the reef vanished behind them and the song faded did Odysseus stop struggling. He hung his head, leaning against the mast. Then he lifted his face and looked at the sea ahead. He untied the ropes. He stood up and went on. Some choices have no good answer, only a less terrible one. On the way home, there was a strait with a monster on each side. On the left was Charybdis, a great whirlpool that swallowed the sea 3 times a day and spat it back out. Any ship caught in the whirlpool would be crushed, without exception. On the right was Scylla, a 6-headed monster hidden in a cliffside cave who, each time a ship passed, would reach out 6 heads and each snatch a crewman. 2 choices. Sail near the left and lose the entire crew. Sail near the right and lose 6 men. Circe had told him, choose the right. Losing 6 is better than losing everyone. Odysseus did not tell his crew the truth. He had them row with all their strength toward the right, telling them only that they needed to pass through this stretch of water. He himself armed and stood at the bow, staring at the cliff on the right. He thought he could fight Scylla off with weapons. Circe had told him this would be useless. He did not believe her. Scylla's 6 heads shot out at once. In the instant Odysseus drew his sword, 6 men were seized from different parts of the ship and vanished into the cave in the cliff. The voices of those 6 men carried down from the cliff. Odysseus, he stood at the bow, listening to those voices, unable to do anything. He had fought beside them at Troy. He knew their names, their faces, where their homes were. They had survived the battlefield, only to die on the way home. The ship passed through the strait. Odysseus sat at the bow, unmoving, for a very long time. Tiresias had said, "The cattle of the sun god Helios must never be touched." Odysseus had told his men this before they even set out. But fate mocked him here once more. The wind turned unfavorable, and they were trapped on an island for nearly a month, their food running out. The soldiers began to starve. Odysseus went ashore alone to pray and fell asleep. During that time, someone convinced the others, "Let's just eat a few of the cattle. We're all about to die. The gods will understand. We'll make it up with a better offering once we're back in Ithaca." They killed the sun god's cattle. Odysseus woke to the smell of roasting meat, and his face went pale in that instant. He knew this was a mistake beyond repair. The wind finally turned, and they set sail. But before they had gone far, the sky began to change color. The sun god complained to Zeus, and Zeus himself hurled his thunder. Lightning struck the ship. Everyone fell into the water. Odysseus clung to a broken piece of the mast, floating on the water, watching his men sink into the sea one by one beside him. Those who had survived Troy, those who had survived the Cyclops' cave, those who had passed the Siren's reef, all of them, gone. Only Odysseus remained, alone, clinging to a piece of wood, drifting on the sea. 20 years. He had left Ithaca, fought for 10 years, drifted at sea for nearly 10 more, and not a single soldier had made it home with him. He was a good warrior, a good commander, a good strategist, but perhaps he was not a good master to those under him. He closed his eyes amid the waves. The whirlpool carried him to a small island. On the island lived a goddess named Calypso. She had everything perfect in myth: beauty, tenderness, a palace cave with breathtaking scenery, and endless food and wine. She fell in love with Odysseus. She offered him the greatest gift of all, immortality. "Stay here," she said. "You need not wander anymore, need not fight anymore, need not lose anyone else. Stay here, be with me, and live forever." Odysseus stayed on that island for 7 years. 7 years. Every day he sat by the sea, looking toward the horizon. That direction was Ithaca. Calypso didn't understand. "She is mortal," she said. "She will grow old, she will die. I am eternal, I can give you everything she cannot. Why?" Odysseus thought for a long while, then said, "Because she is Penelope, because that island is Ithaca, because not everything can be replaced." In the end, it was Athena who intervened. She went to Zeus, and Zeus sent Hermes to order Calypso to let him go. Calypso was silent for a long time. Then she helped Odysseus build a raft. On the morning he left, she stood on the shore and watched the raft grow smaller and smaller until it vanished over the horizon. She did not weep, but the sea wind blew especially hard that day. Poseidon had not forgotten him. The raft had sailed for 17 days, and just as Ithaca was about to appear on the horizon, Poseidon rose from the sea, and a great wave shattered the raft. Odysseus fell into the water. He swam, he struggled, he fought a breath between wave and wave, not knowing how long he swam. At last he crawled onto an unfamiliar beach and collapsed, exhausted, asleep. When he woke, he heard the laughter of young women. It was Princess Nausicaa of the Phaeacians, who had come to the beach with her maids to wash clothes, and had found him. She did not flee or scream, but calmly had her maids bring him food and clothing, then led him to meet her parents. The Phaeacians were the friendliest of peoples. Their king, Alcinous, without knowing his name or origin, held a banquet and gave him the finest lodging. At that banquet, a bard sang of the Trojan War, sang of the wooden horse, sang of those heroes. Odysseus covered his face with his cloak and wept silently. The king noticed and asked him, "Who are you? Why do these stories move you to tears?" Odysseus lowered the cloak. "My name," he said, "is Odysseus, king of Ithaca. I am the man in that story." The hall fell silent for a long moment. Then the king rose. "They had the finest sailors in the world," he said, "and they would carry Odysseus safely home to Ithaca." That very night, Odysseus was helped aboard a ship. He was so exhausted that he fell asleep almost as soon as the ship left port. The Phaeacian ship sailed through the night in silence, faster than any ordinary vessel. At dawn, before the mist had cleared, they neared a shore and gently set the still sleeping Odysseus down on the sand along with his gifts, then slipped quietly away. When Odysseus woke, at first he didn't recognize the shore. Athena had shrouded it in mist, making it look unfamiliar, so that he would hear what she had to say before anything else. She came to his side and lifted the mist, revealing the land's true face, the coastline, the rocks, the distant mountains. He recognized it. He closed his eyes, opened his hand, and felt the air of that land. "Ithaca," he said, his voice trembling for the first time in truth in 20 years. He knelt and kissed the ground. But he still could not go home. Athena told him, "Your palace is filled with more than 100 suitors." 20 years had passed, and people believed Odysseus was dead. Nobles and young men had flocked in crowds to Odysseus's palace, eating his food, drinking his wine, squandering his wealth, and courting Penelope. They pressured Penelope to choose one of them to marry, to admit that Odysseus was dead. Penelope said, "When I finish weaving this cloth, I will marry." She wove day and night, but what she wove by day, she secretly unraveled by night. 3 years. She used an endlessly unfinished piece of cloth to stall for 3 years, until a servant betrayed her secret, and the suitors furiously demanded she make her choice at once. This was the eve of Odysseus's return. Athena disguised him as an old beggar, so he could walk through the palace, observe, and remain unrecognized. The first living creature to recognize him was outside the palace. It was the old dog he had raised 20 years ago, Argos. The dog lay curled by a heap of refuse, covered in fleas, too weak to even stand. But the moment it saw the beggar, its tail began to wag, faintly. It struggled to rise, but could not. With the last of its strength, it recognized its master. Then it closed its eyes. 20 years of waiting. It had waited long enough. Odysseus turned his head away. The tears he had not shed through every trial of the past 20 years quietly fell, here at last. He entered the palace. He saw the suitors, in his own palace, drinking his wine, singing frivolous songs, mocking his servants for sport. He endured it. In his heart, he kept an account of every face. Then he saw Penelope. 20 years, she was thinner than he remembered, fine lines at the corners of her eyes, a wariness in her gaze he had not even seen on the battlefield of Troy. But she was still waiting. She was still waiting. He wanted to rush forward and tell her it was him, that he had come home, but he held back. The time was not yet right. Penelope announced her final condition. In the palace stood Odysseus' great bow, a bow that ordinary men couldn't even draw the string of. Whoever could use it to shoot an arrow through the sockets of 12 axes lined in a row, to him she would be wed. The suitors, eager, stepped forward one by one and failed one by one. Not a single one could draw that bow. Then it was the old beggar's turn. Everyone mocked him, but he took the bow. He ran his hand along its length, gently, as if touching an old friend after a long separation. Then, without effort, he drew the bowstring, knocked an arrow, aimed, and released. The arrow passed through all 12 axes. The hall fell into dead silence. Odysseus lowered the bow, looked around, and in his true voice spoke the words he had not spoken in 20 years. "I am Odysseus, master of this palace. I have returned." Odysseus, his son Telemachus, and a handful of loyal servants carried out a long reckoning against the more than 100 suitors. Those who had squandered his wealth in his own palace, insulted his family, and tried to take his wife. That night, they met their end. Then came the final moment. The palace grew quiet. The danger was over, and Telemachus went to see to what remained. Odysseus stood alone in the palace corridor. Penelope came out. She was not certain. She did not dare be certain. 20 years, she had seen too many liars, too many false claims, too many people telling her that her husband was dead. Too many who had tried every manner of lie to get close to her. How could she be sure this was truly him? She tested him. She had the servants move the bed from her chamber out for this man who claimed to be Odysseus. That bed had been built by Odysseus's own hands. He had carved it from a living olive tree, its bedpost still rooted, immovable. Only two people knew this, she and he. Odysseus said, "Wait, how could that bed be moved? I built it from a living olive tree. Unless someone cut the tree down, that bed cannot be moved." Penelope's tears fell in that instant. She stepped forward and embraced him. 20 years, no more words were needed, only holding him tightly. Odysseus, king of Ithaca, after 20 years away, had finally come home. He did not bring back the 12 ships he had set out with. He did not bring back the hundreds of soldiers who had left with him. He did not even bring back the man he had been 20 years before. But he brought back one thing, himself. The story is over. The sea wind still blows. The fire has dimmed. Someone once asked me, how does a story get told and retold for 3,000 years? The answer is simple, really. Because every generation can see itself in the story. Some see war, some see love, some see loss, some see hope. And tonight, perhaps what you saw was coming home. If so, then this ancient song has not traveled 3,000 years in vain. Now, let this story stay here, in today, in tonight. Let the waves carry your exhaustion away. Let the wind carry your worries away. May you, wherever you are, find your own Ithaca. I am the one who borrowed Homer's voice, and tonight, the one who told you this story. May we meet again in another ancient legend. Good night.